Let me start that again. Welcome to the American Chamber of Commerce in Saudi Arabia's event organized by the Women in Business Committee. My name is Amanda Tafunai, and I am a board member of the American Chamber of Commerce in Saudi Arabia. Our vision at AmChamKSA is to be the principal advocate for the American business community here in the kingdom by providing companies the ability to connect, grow, and prosper. Today, we are joined by our members and their guests representing diverse industries, both locally and globally, and we would like to thank you for joining us celebrating International Women's Day. We're also pleased to have with us on the call representatives from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and thank them for their continued support of AmChamKSA, as well as former chair of our organization, Mr. Tom Walters of ExxonMobil. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. At any time during the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's panelists. To do so, just type your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of the control panel, and please include your name and company. As time allows, our panelists will address as many questions as they can during the Q&A session at the end. We will be recording this webinar. We also invite you to participate in our post-event survey to help us with future programming. On behalf of AmChamKSA, we would like to recognize our Women in Business Committee sponsor, UPS. Their efforts and engaging programming and initiatives are enabling the participation of women and women leaders globally, which is critical to economic prosperity. We are proud to partner with an organization that helps develop innovative ways to serve the community. I'd now like to introduce my fellow board member, Jaime Stansberry, the chair of the Women in Business Committee. Enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. International Women's Day is a day to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women around the world. And this year's theme of Choose to Challenge means choosing to celebrate achievements while continuing to challenge gender inequality. We believe these actions go hand in hand. As we're all aware, Saudi Arabia has made some pretty significant strides in recent years through gender-specific labor law reforms. And this has created new opportunities for women living and working in Saudi Arabia to participate in the workforce across all industries and levels. It's also creating a more welcoming environment for American and other international businesswomen and executives to come and work in Saudi Arabia. So we here at the Women in Business Committee, we're excited to be holding this event and see it as our mission to advance women's leadership and career development here in the kingdom. I'm especially pleased to have two panelists with us today who are AmCham members, and we'll be talking about our topic, which is winning strategies for American companies in Saudi Arabia to attract and develop women leaders. Before we dive into this topic, we are very honored to have with us today from the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia, Chargée d'Affaires Martina Strong, to provide opening remarks. So on behalf of AmCham Saudi Arabia, the Women in Business Committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Jaime and Amanda, for that introduction. And it's really a pleasure for me to join all of you, our panelists, and of course, all the women out there in the audience. Let me thank the AmCham for their leadership in organizing today's events. Let me also add a few words of thanks for our panelists, UPS President for International Public Affairs and Sustainability, Penny Naas, with whom I actually had an opportunity to work way back during our commerce days. And then Dana Al-Ajlani, who is also joining us. And I know that their participation and insights on expanding opportunities for women in Saudi Arabia and throughout the region will be particularly helpful to all of the women in the audience. So today is International Women's Day, and it's a day of celebration, of course. And we have an opportunity to celebrate and thank our mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunts, daughters, but also our colleagues, our mentors in business, and the supporters whose support and assistance we rely on every single day. So you've heard this year's theme for Women's Day, and it really is fitting because, of course, over the course of the past years, we battled the coronavirus and resulting economic disruptions. Women have continued to lead, and they were vaccine researchers, healthcare providers, educators, leaders in many other professions. And these women have been our heroes. They've been doing their best to help us defeat the pandemic. And they have been the lifeline for our countries, our communities, and of course, our families. I had the pleasure to join some of you in the inaugural event of Women in Business, and that was just over a year ago. And it seems like eons ago for many of us who have since then struggled with the COVID pandemic. But the goal of the committee is absolutely crucial to everything that's happening here in Saudi Arabia and to the women's role. So the first event, of course, took place right at the beginning of the W20 and the G20 effort that Saudi Arabia undertook during the 2020 year. And women's empowerment, entrepreneurship, economic opportunity, security, all of that was at the heart of the W20 achievements and efforts under Saudi leadership. The W20 communique elevated the inclusiveness of women in both public and private decision-making, and it really focused on helping women level the playing field, open up the workplace, and create future opportunities in the post-pandemic world. So in addition to the W20, we should of course recognize, as Jaime had mentioned, the really tremendous progress that Saudi women are making under the Vision 2030 reform program. And it's really tremendous to watch here in Riyadh, and of course those of you who are in other cities, to watch the progress as women enter the workforce. They have now exceeded, I believe, 30%, which is really dramatic, and it means that they have achieved their Vision 2030 goal well before the actual target date. And what I see whenever I travel around Saudi Arabia is just the dramatic enthusiasm and tremendous pride of women who in the past have not had the opportunity. So I just want to say that those of you who are in Saudi Arabia, you are all feeling it. Those of you who are joining us from outside of Saudi Arabia, you haven't had an opportunity to see it, but it's really something. I wanted to say a few words about the US companies and how they're contributing to this effort. And of course, we have a number of them joining us today, but we have Penny with UPS, and their Women's Exporters Program is providing, together with the Manshat Small and Medium Enterprises Authority, a series of programs to help empower and support women entrepreneurs. We have ExxonMobil, and they, through their Global Women in Management program, is collaborating with King Khalid Foundation, and they're training women in management, leadership, and technical skills. We have Lockheed Martin, and they're making significant investment in STEM education. PepsiCo and their Tamakani program is again providing training for Saudi women. The list goes on and on, but suffice it to say, US companies are very much at the center of the dramatic efforts that are unfolding here in Saudi Arabia. And it makes all of us here in the mission to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the US Embassy incredibly proud to partner with our AmCham colleagues, to partner with our companies to help drive that progress. Look, I could go on and on. As I said, the work that's being done here by our companies has been really tremendous. And these efforts have had a significant effect on opening up space for women in the workforce and in leadership positions. And they really signal our collective commitment to the core American values, which of course we are charged with promoting wherever we are around the world. And I'm really proud to say that today's event with the Women in Business Committee is just a first in a series of events that we will be sponsoring during the International Women's Day and then throughout Women's History Month. And again, it's with the goal of promoting learning, networking, raising awareness about the way that we can support women at work and we can support their empowerment. Later this month, our mission will be launching the Ignite Saudi Women's Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, which shares many of the same goals that we will be discussing today. It's to promote opportunities for women to engage in Saudi Arabia's emerging industries through entrepreneurship and investment. And this program will really strengthen the ecosystem by connecting Saudi business women with American private sector counterparts. And the AmCham Women in Business Committee, as well as the Atlantic Council's Empower Me program, are both our partners, and we're really thrilled that they have joined us in this important initiative. And then other programs through partners will, again, focus on sharing knowledge. We have a program with ISAW, which will provide skills building and networking opportunities for professional and young women just entering the workplace. And let me just close by, again, congratulating all of you, thanking all of you for everything that you do every single day, but especially today during International Women's Day. And let me just say, I personally am thrilled to be joining you and hearing your insights, but at the same time, I just want to say on behalf of our entire team at the U.S. Embassy, we are really, really glad and proud to be your partners, to be partners of our companies. And if there's ever anything that we can do for you to support your efforts, whether it is in support of women or in support of your businesses, please let us know. This is why we're here, and we are proud of our mission. And thank you, and thank you again to our panelists, and my best wishes to all of you.
Thank you so much, Charge and Martina. It's a pleasure to have you with us again. You've now been at both of our events. And thank you for just being a remarkable example of women's leadership for us here in the Kingdom. Really appreciate it.
Thank
So
you.
now it's time, now it's time to kick off our panel discussion. We're very pleased to have with us Penny Naas, UPS President of International Public Affairs and Sustainability, to share her insights and thoughts on developing women leaders. So Penny, thank you so much for joining us this morning, your time, and a very warm welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
No, thank you so much. I have to say it's so nice to start International Women's Day seeing a former colleague as the charge in Saudi. And I think there's nothing more awesome or nothing cooler than seeing the women you started out with succeed. And I was actually, Martina, I had an opportunity to speak with somebody who we worked with a long time ago, who's also gone on. It was a woman who was a role model for me. She was our Assistant Secretary, Sue Esserman, who's also now retired, but has gone on and has started a whole center looking at helping women at the University of Maryland. And it's just so impressive to reconnect with people and see where they've gone and to see their success and celebrate it. So it's so great. What a great way to start the day. So just by way of background, so Martina and I started off at the Department of Commerce back when we were, 5 years old, many years ago, probably. And from there, I went to the Bank City Group where I worked. I transferred to Europe and worked for 12 years in Europe for the Bank City Group. And while I was there, I also transferred to work for the company UPS, United Parcel Service, where I am today. And for me, my background has always been, I'm just extremely passionate about cross-border trade and about trade in general. And I really see trade and I see the cross-border exchanges like we're having today as so critically important for helping people fulfill their individual destinies and their individual freedoms. I mean, today is International Women's Day, and in part, I hope that at some point, while it's always wonderful to celebrate all the women we know, I hope at some point that we get to a place where we don't need to have an International Women's Day to call out the differences and some of the challenges we face. Because we, as women, we are different from men, and we have our own strengths, and that's what we should be celebrating, is those strengths that we bring. I think about the pandemic and what I've been going through, and I think many on this call probably have been going through. And when I think about who I'd want to hire in the future, I just think about all the women who've had to be agile, educating kids while also trying to do work, while also, preparing meals, while also trying to keep things running in the family, perseverance, determination, all the things we've had to demonstrate for the past few months. And I think all of those are the leadership qualities in business we look for the future, but are also what we've seen the strengths of women over the past few months, now over a year for me. I've been home in my basement for over a year now. So, and I'm really sick of doing dishes 3 times a day for my kids who don't do them themselves, even though I try to convince them to. So I think that when we think about International Women's Day, we think about all the things that we want. It's that perseverance, that agility, that determination that we as women bring to our jobs, to our families, to our societies. And I'll maybe touch on a little bit later. The thing that I think we also are is brave. And many times women have to be brave about taking leaps and pushing boundaries and doing things differently. But I think sometimes we have to be pushed a little bit to be brave about ourselves. And I'll be brave about my kids. I'll be brave about my family. I'll be brave to help my neighbor. But when it comes to myself, I'm maybe sometimes a little bit shyer about pushing myself forward. So when I think about that, when I think about the characteristics that in business we want to be looking at, that we want to be pulling out of our people, that's the one that I think we've been trying to help women with at UPS with our Women's Exporter program. It's giving people that support and women that support to be brave. So with that, maybe I'll take a stop there and I'll look forward to the later conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. That was fantastic and inspirational. I appreciate it. Now it's my honor to introduce Dana Al-Ajlani, ExxonMobil Saudi Arabia Vice President of Public and Government Affairs, as she provides another perspective on International Women's Day. Look forward to hearing your story, and thank you so much, Dana, for being with us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with everyone, and happy International Women's Day to everyone. So really it's inspiring to hear Martina and Penny talk about their career and just to see where they've reached in their career. And I'm happy to be here today to share with you a little bit about my career journey as a Saudi woman working in Saudi Arabia. So just to give you again a little bit of background, I'm Saudi, born and raised in Saudi Arabia, but I spent around half of my life abroad. And so I went to high school in the UK, college in the US, graduate school at the American University in Beirut, and then I came back to Saudi Arabia. So this is quite a long time ago. So this is a different Saudi Arabia than Martina had given us an overview of. This was around 15 years ago, and there weren't really many women working around that time. And so not only was I the only woman in the room at that point in time, but I was also usually the only woman in the building. So it's taking it to another level. And this theme has really followed me throughout my entire career. So it's never bothered me. I've always taken it as a challenge, but I've also made it my personal mission to ensure that when I leave a job, I'm no longer the only woman there. So to help as much as I can so that it's easier for the next woman. And so when I was asked to participate in this panel, I really reflected back and thought about the top 3 things that have helped me in my career. And that's what I was going to share with you today. And needless to say, these are my personal views and don't necessarily reflect the views of the organizations that I've worked for. But I have to say that all of the organizations that I work for have been very supportive towards diversity and inclusion. So the first thing really was the importance of working hard. I mean, my work ethic was instilled in me from a very young age by my parents, who really understood how hard it was for women in Saudi Arabia at the time to succeed professionally. And so they told me that the only thing that they can give me that nobody can take away from me is my degree. So really throughout my career, I worked very hard to prove that I was just as good as my male colleagues and that I deserved the opportunities that came my way. Of course, that started with a college degree, and then it's a continuous process. As you know, I continue to challenge myself every single day. And today I've learned quite a bit about Zoom, so the learning continues. And I've always tried to push myself outside of my comfort zone, learn new skills, and continue to really invest in myself, if I can call it that. Because without hard work, you can't really position yourself for opportunities. So that was really the first one, was working hard. The second one really was the role of enlightened leaders in my career. And these are people who actively supported women's participation in the workplace and were willing to challenge the norm at a time when this was still taboo. And so they wanted to hire women, even though society at that time wasn't really ready for it. And sometimes they even got some backlash internally from it. So I'll give you an example. At one of the organizations that I worked at, I was giving a presentation. So I was as part of a panel, and it was a room of 200 men at the headquarters of the organization. And when the master of ceremony introduced me, he said, and we have Dana here today to talk to us about natural resource management in Saudi Arabia. And don't worry, the CEO will act as her guardian. So I was just a little surprised by that, and honestly a little bit, embarrassed by that comment. And to his credit, the CEO who had pushed to hire me in the organization turned around and said, she is a subject matter expert. We are here in a professional environment. I am not her guardian, and she does not need a guardian, and she is her own guardian. So it's really behavior like that from leaders that makes a difference in women's careers. And then the third thing is I am a real believer in the importance of women-focused trainings and initiatives. So there's another example that has changed my life, which is the program that Martina mentioned, Global Women in Management. At the time, I was working for the King Khalid Foundation. I applied for the program. I got in. It was fully sponsored by the ExxonMobil Foundation. It was to be run in Egypt for 4 weeks. So I went to the CEO of the foundation and told her, please, I really want to go. I know I've just joined your organization, but it's very important. So even though it was inconvenient for her to lose someone who she's just hired for 4 weeks, she knew the importance of these kind of programs. And so she said, fine, go. Then I came home and I told my husband, and I was 6 months pregnant, and I was like, no, I can't do it. And again, he pushed me. And that program really changed my life. I enjoyed it so much that when I came back, I said, okay, we have to bring this to Saudi Arabia. And I went and I lobbied at ExxonMobil, and I told them, please, and they were a little bit surprised because they had never thought that a program like that would be of interest to women in Saudi Arabia. At the time, they had no women working for the company. And so to their credit and the credit of King Khalid Foundation, they were open to the idea. They adapted the program. So we translated all of the material into Arabic. It was the first time that was done. And we brought it to the kingdom. It was turned into a 2-week program instead of 4 weeks, because that's more socially acceptable in Saudi Arabia for women to be gone from their homes for 2 whole weeks. And it was such a success that we ended up running the program 4 years in a row in Saudi Arabia and once in Qatar, and have managed to train over 100 women in that program. And so the way that it changed my life was I got introduced to everything that ExxonMobil was doing in the space of inclusion and diversity. And I ended up, the first year I ran the program from the King Khalid side. And then the subsequent years I joined ExxonMobil, and I had the privilege to run this program from the ExxonMobil side. So I am a big advocate on the importance of, and especially in Saudi Arabia, supporting internal and external training and mentorship programs targeting women at entry level, but also mid-career level, to continuously develop their skills and equip them with the competencies that they need to reach senior roles. And so, in my personal opinion, companies can never focus too much on developing women leaders. And this shouldn't only be done at their organization, but I also encourage them to try and support programs that do it for other sectors, for government sectors, nonprofit sectors, and other sectors as well. So, in conclusion, I just want to say that on a personal level, I've always tried to support increasing the number of women in the workplace. But as Dana, my influence is limited. So through the supportive organizations that I've worked for, like ExxonMobil, I was happy to be able to expand the number of women reached. But again, there's only so much that one organization can do. So I feel that all of us here today need to make more of an effort to make it both our personal and our company's mission to support women in the workplace. And from what I've heard from the US Embassy and UPS, clearly this is something that a lot of people are doing. But again, we need some more, and especially in Saudi Arabia, because with Vision 2030 and everything that the Saudi government has done to break down barriers, really it's very important for us all to support these efforts by increasing our outreach and supporting more programs in the area of diversity and inclusion. So I'm happy to take any questions and continue the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dana. That was fantastic. And having been here for a decade, I can resonate with being the only person in the room to seeing the room quite full. So it's a wonderful, wonderful time to be here, and just fantastic to hear your story and how you continue to contribute to being a pioneer there. So thank you so much. So yes, we'd like to pivot into a bit of moderated discussion right now. And I'd just like to remind our participants, you're welcome to send in Q&As as well. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you. Penny, I'll go ahead and start with you. Thank you for sharing about your career in banking, logistics, and that's fantastic that both you and Martina were at the Department of Commerce together. We'd just like to hear a little bit more about some of those challenges that you experienced in your career, and what advice do you have specifically for supporting women in these traditionally male-dominated industries?
Yeah, well, I think, Dana, I think, has covered a lot of the really important aspects of, I think, some things to think about in terms of your career. If I could maybe to talk a little bit about, as I think through, and I think what she said really, what I think Dana said resonated for me. I was also very fortunate to have sponsors, both overt and behind the scenes, who helped progress me forward. And I think that that's something that we all have to be cognizant of. That I think that mentors are discussed, but we sometimes forget to talk about sponsors or supporters. And I think that they're even more important sometimes than a mentor in your career, because you don't know always where the decisions are going to be made. You don't always know who's going to be in the room, and you need those allies that are going to speak on your behalf, even when you're not there, you don't know the discussions going on. And I think that's something that's really important for women to develop and to think about. And part of that comes from hard work. Part of that comes from directly asking for help sometimes with people. And so I think that's a really important thing. But the second thing I think that Dana spoke about, and again, I think is really, really important, is the support that we as women give to each other. And so an example I want to give was this past week, I was in a big meeting at UPS. There's only 3 women in a meeting of about probably 15 of us, and we're talking about some issues that are going on. And a bunch of my male colleagues started speaking about something, which was an issue I had alerted them to and had informed them about. And then they started pontificating about this issue. And one of the other women spoke up and said, well, I think that's really great. And it's really great that Penny brought this to our attention. And I called her up after the meeting and I said, I am so grateful to you. Not that I want credit for being the person that brings up the issue. Not that as a woman, I'm seeking credit, but at the same time, I'm so appreciative that my female colleague called out that, Penny brought this issue to us. Penny had educated us on this issue. Maybe what are Penny's views? And I think it's really important as women. I think we've all been there when we've said something and then nobody reacts, and then a man says the same thing and everyone goes, oh my God, that's a great idea. And I just would say that as women, it's really important that we support one another when we're in the room and we hear those instances to say, yeah, isn't it? I think Penny made that comment earlier. I think Dana made that comment. I think Martina's the one that said that, actually brought that up, right? And, or as Martina said, I think that those are the kinds of things that subtly we also need to do to make sure that our voices are heard, because our voices are different. We bring different perspectives. But that doesn't diminish the messages we're bringing. And in fact, I think women sometimes normally have more foresight on issues than men do. But when it comes to who gets credit for it sometimes, and credit's important in terms of promotion, in terms of your career advancement, in terms of your annual reviews, in terms of what you want to do, I think it's important that we all support one another in both the training and in the mentoring and in the sponsorship, but also in those day-to-day meetings and interactions. And I think it's going to become even more important. Zoom is a wonderful thing. All of our boxes are the same on Zoom. We're all the same level. But as we move back to different kinds of workplaces in the future, maybe with some people in a room and some people on Zoom, it's going to continue to be really important that we help not only elevate our own voice, but the voices of our colleagues and peers, and particularly potentially the voices of our female colleagues. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to take any other questions or comments.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so Dana, you spoke a lot about the Global Leadership Program and just how you both personally benefited from that and then made it an opportunity for many others. I would love to have you share a little bit more. We have a number of our American businesses here on the call, and you already gave some great tips on ways that sort of a traditional model could be adapted to make it of more use here in Saudi, and wondering if you could share a little bit more about that to inspire some of the companies here to do similar things, especially ongoing support that could happen after an intensive training like that.
So yes, I worked in the nonprofit sector and then in the private sector. So I know that there are a lot of nonprofits here in Saudi Arabia that we support as a corporation, as ExxonMobil, and some that also we don't support, that other organizations like Pepsi supports in the kingdom. And so there are programs like Global Women in Management that I just mentioned. We have a program at the company that's called Win in a Box, which is basically a toolkit that it only takes one person to get together a group of people and then ask them some diversity questions. And then once they give them the answers, that person that's leading the discussion then shares with them some truths. So it just gets these conversations going in the office. And I find that from that, people then start to pay more attention to diversity in the office and make more of an effort. So there are these kind of things. There are programs that we support in Saudi Arabia with Injaz. We also support education for employment, Al-Nahda organization. So there are lots of internal mentorship, coaching programs, external ones that you can fund, and just even recording the discussion from today and sharing it in an internal communication. So there are different ways to help support the issue internally and externally.
Thank you. Those are great examples, ones we can all learn from. Yeah, so Penny, back over to you. Now we've talked a lot about what we've done internally in different companies, and would love to hear you talk a bit more about UPS's work supporting women-owned businesses. And I can already see in our Q&A here, we have some questions around that with women entrepreneurs. So yes, if you can give us a little bit more color on what that looks like at UPS and how we can support those types of initiatives here too.
Yeah, no, so happy to talk a little bit about what we're doing to help women exporters and women entrepreneurs. I think there's two other things I'd like to touch on maybe first real quick. One is we also at UPS have a women's leadership development program. It's one of what we call our business resource groups. We have those around the world. We have a whole different group of them, and they're really affinity groups for our employees who are looking for those internal forum and those colleagues internally that may be facing some of the same issues that they are. And for us, the WLD, the Women's Leadership Development groups, have been important platforms for women to develop skills as well as to heighten their profile inside the organization. So that's something we do. The second thing we do is we do a lot of work on supplier diversity. And that is another area where I think Western companies, US-based companies, international companies, we have a really important role to play in terms of being very intentional about looking for diverse suppliers, because that's where we can have a tremendous impact, while also furthering our own goals around resilience and building up our diverse supply chains moving forward. Now, at UPS, we launched about 2.5 years ago a program called the Women's Exporter Program. Martina will recognize this. It comes out of a bit of our US government experience, but it's about really providing programs and capacity building and training and networks for women entrepreneurs, women small business owners to develop the skills they need via capacity building, via trainings, whether pre-COVID they were in person, now they're almost all virtual, but helping women in particular develop those skills in a format that may be more accommodating for women. We're here on an AmCham platform, but I think we all know, talking about going back to days where we were the only women in the room, you know, some of these networking platforms where companies go may be reaching a certain subset of the population more than others. And so we have really tried to create those formats and those forums where women are comfortable showing up and attending and learning. And what we've discovered is there's millions of them out there. So then the second thing we do is try to help them network with one another. And when you combine capacity building with networking, you get power. And so that's what our program has done. We've specifically helped 6,000 women entrepreneurs to date with their exporting and to explore and to actually do exporting. And we've got some phenomenal case studies. One of my colleagues who specifically works on this program cries every time she starts talking about the women we've helped, because when you help a woman, you help her community, you help, it's a broader bucket that you're doing, and you can see how it cascades out into the community when you help women export. So that's something that, you know, we've been working on really specifically. We've also worked with the Saudi G20 presidency on this via the W20 group to talk about, in particular, how to make sure that women are able to tap into the digital economy and to help grow their business via all the opportunities that are there on the online space. COVID's been devastating to many businesses, and I know that, and it's really unfortunate. And at the same time, there are some who have figured out how to pivot and move into a new space and into a new direction. And we've been pleased where we can, working with the Saudi government to help with that. So that's a little bit about what we've done. And so we have tons and tons of partnerships. We have tons of other things we can talk about. Christina Struhler from UPS and myself are happy to answer any questions or direct anybody to that if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. And a lot of those points are very relevant to the context here. I think especially figuring out those networking spaces and ways to move from female and gender inclusion to leadership and advancement, and what are some of the spaces that are needed for that. So that's fantastic. And also appreciate you mentioning the W20. I know that Dana, you were involved in the B20, specifically the Women in Business Task Force. And I think it is a very critical time for implementing a number of those different recommendations. So yes, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to what it was like to be involved in that and how that connects to some of the issues that we're talking about today.
Yes, so there were recommendations that came out of this Women in Business Action Council that was part of the B20. But I think that the most important thing is to recognize Saudi Arabia for creating this Women in Business Action Council. This was the first time that anything like this had been created at the B20. So it really goes to show how serious the leadership is about reforms when it comes to women's economic empowerment. And it was made up of around 60 to 70 members. Again, it was great to meet them in person and to network for the first meeting, but then the pandemic happened. But thankfully, they were quick to move everything virtually. And so we got to meet. So the setup was around, if I'm remembering this correctly, 30% from the host country and 70% from the non-host countries. And so there were only 30% Saudi women and the rest were 70%. There were women and men, which was great because they add a lot of value to the discussions. And without them sponsoring women's advancement in the workplace, it becomes very difficult because they're the majority in many companies and in many sectors. And so it was very important to have their viewpoint, to have the external international viewpoint to guide some of these policy recommendations in the kingdom moving forward. So I really appreciated the willingness of the kingdom to put this forward, to make it a priority, and to learn from other countries that are further along on the issue of diversity and inclusion.
Thank you. And that was news to me. I did not realize that was the first time there had been a Women in Business Task Force. So congratulations. That's exciting that was launched from here. So I have a final question for each of you before we turn it over to some panelist questions. Penny, you've already alluded to this a number of times, and it's something that resonates, I think, with everyone on this call, and that's the disproportionate effect that COVID has had on women. I know this is a theme that many of us are focusing on today as well. So yes, I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to what impacts you've seen sort of at the business level, and also to that larger theme of women-owned businesses. I know you've touched on that, but if you could expand on it a little bit more as we close out.
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of conversation around this. And so I sit in the United States, obviously, but I worked for many, many years in Europe. And so when I think about how COVID has hit, I'll speak a little to my current experience, which is just that when I've had to go into the office a couple of times. Martina looks like she's sitting in the office, and I'm sure the embassies are probably having to operate. But when I've had to go into UPS, I've had to fly down to our headquarters for a couple meetings the last few months. And when I went in and I went down to the lunchroom where there's only now 30, 40 people coming in person, it's all men. And it's not men that are just because it's only men that are senior in the company. It's just, and when I went and talked to them, they said, oh yeah, my wives kicked me out of the house because they wanted me to, I was bugging them. So they told me to go to work. And so, and I found that really odd that, like, I don't know if women are self-selecting this or how this is in our societies or in our cultures, but that, yes, men have helped out during COVID in various ways as we've all transitioned to our new lives and our new worlds and kids being home and things like that, and the differences we've all had to come around. But at the same time, there still seems to be some disparate impact with regards to how, who's picked up what in the household in order to make sure that, things keep running and that our kids are getting educated. I'm terribly worried about my kids and their education and what's happened in the past year. But so when I think about that and I think about all the women-owned businesses, I think about what women-owned businesses are. A lot of them are service-based. A lot of the jobs that we've lost have been jobs that women have. Women have been disproportionately impacted because women are more than 70 to 80% of the people working in the healthcare industry. I think globally is that number. And so, when it comes to the COVID risk, it's women that probably disproportionately bear that. And they really bear it because I don't know if you know, but the original masks that have been made were made to a male design spec. So when the nurses and the women doctors were getting the initial mask and PPE, there were big gaps because they didn't quite fit the female face like they fit the male face. And so they were also disproportionately catching COVID because the masks weren't designed for a female face. So you look at all of these factors, and the question is, it's not surprising that women are having to step out of the workforce in disproportionate numbers, that women workers have been hit disproportionately by this, that there's other things that are going on that are disproportionately impacting women. The question is, how are we going to come back from this in a way that's intentional, that allows us to shift and change some of this, to retain the things that are good about, if you can say anything's good, things that have been good or learned during COVID. We've learned that you can do Zoom. Not everybody has to be in person, is one. But how can we be intentional about coming back from that? So we at UPS, again, we're trying to help women businesses as best we can to pivot and to move to that new digital world that's now emerged, and to help women reach new customers and new consumers for their products, because the retail space is also, I think, going to dramatically shift as a result of all of this. So those are some of the things that I think about when it comes to kind of building back and what do we do. And women are resilient. I think there's nothing we're not but resilient, and we're going to need it, I think, to come back from this. And my hope is we come back from it stronger.
Thank you. Well said. Had to kick out a couple kids myself to be able to host this call today. So yes, I think we're all in that space. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. So Deanna, my last question for you is, one of our goals at the Women in Business Committee is to attract more American business women and leaders to come here to the Kingdom. And I'm happy to say that we can do that today. So I would love to just hear any advice you would have for an American woman or for some of our American companies here who are looking to recruit more expatriates to come. What advice would you give on what it's like to live and work today?
So first, it takes maybe courage, because I know that Saudi Arabia is not a country where we've shared a lot about what it's like to live and work in the Kingdom. I think that it's a country shrouded in mystery. And it's partly our fault, the Saudis. We don't do enough to communicate about what it's really like on the ground. So I think that the first thing would be to reach out to AmCham, to the women on this call, and to even try to connect with, if they're coming through an international company, to connect with any women that they already work for that company here in Saudi Arabia, really to dispel some of these myths and to find out what it's like to live and work in the Kingdom. The Kingdom has come a very, very long way from the day when I joined the workforce, I can tell you. I mean, I'm no longer the only woman in the building. I'm no longer the only woman in the room. Things have changed. And life in Saudi Arabia is better for it, I'm happy to say. Like, even sometimes I think about, if I tell my daughter what it was like when I was growing up in Saudi Arabia, I think she's not going to believe me. So, so it's changed that much. So I suggest to reach out to the contacts, build your contacts before you get here. This is a society that social networks are very important in the workplace and in your social life. So build these networks before you come for a visit, meet these people, hear what it's like, and be open to this adventure, because even though it might be a little harder than in other countries, at the end of the day, I find it's very fulfilling. And you'll make, I know people who've come and lived here for many years, and they've made very meaningful friends and connections in Saudi Arabia and have very fond memories of their time here.
Thank you. That's great. And similar to you, Penny and Martina, when I first met Dana, we were very quickly able to connect our social networks to know some women here who have been fantastic role models. So those social networks are extremely important wherever you are in the world. So thank you. Well, great. We have some good questions that have come in, and thank you for our attendees and participants for asking them. One that I think would be great for you to start with, Penny, is if you have any experience or insight on how some of these women management programs and HR inclusive strategies have actually improved company business growth. And there's another one I'll just add to that that's similar, and it's, have you noticed a trend away from these programs being diversity programs or female inclusion programs and really just part of the policy of how the whole company approaches these issues of women's leadership?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you know, UPS has a CEO who's a female. She took over in June of 2020, and our stock price has gone up 40% since she took over. So I think there's nothing like that to kind of show that the importance of, I think when women can drive the results and bring results, and the stock price has gone up because of her. She's a phenomenal former CFO of a company called Home Depot in the United States. And she's done an amazing job on the financial side of our company, and the market's really reacted to it. So I think she's a prime example in our company at the moment of what female leadership looks like and what it can bring in terms of value. With regards to women's leadership programs, I'll just say from me, my personal experience, I've actually gone outside my company. I did a lot of stuff inside my company for a while, but I've reached a level where, frankly, besides the CEO, there's not that much more above me. So I went to an outside organization. I work with an organization called World 50, and they have a Women's 50 network. And it's so popular, they're now starting their third group of Women's 50. And it's women because there's certain issues, leadership, et cetera, that we want to talk about that we can't talk about when we're in our industry verticals. So we do want to learn about industry trends, what's going on, et cetera. But it's also getting together to say, how are we going to manage our careers in a world where half of our workforce is remote? How much are you going to have to be in person to continue to let people know you aspire for those senior level positions? So, we all know headquarters are important. How is that gonna be in the future? And that's a big open question we have. With regards to more generally women's leadership, I think it's absolutely crucial. I think leadership development in general is incredibly crucial. But I think that giving people, and I would say the same is true of other groups. So in the United States right now, some of our diverse employees really want to come together in a way to talk about their unique challenges. And I think creating those spaces and those opportunities for people to do that, but then figuring out how to transition that into promoting people up the organization is incredibly important. And that's where I think leadership in the company, I saw one of the questions in the Q&A, you really need your leaders. Leaders really have to be intentional about saying, we want diversity. And if they say it, going back to Donna's example of her colleagues, then it will happen. And I think without that, and if you don't see that in your company, go find another job. Because if it's not there, you're not going to drive it. It's going to be something that you need to see, and you can go help the organization, but up to a point. You really need to see it in the senior leadership.
Thank you. So on a related note, Dana, we have a question from Tamer Musalem at PepsiCo, and he's asking, how critical do you see the role of male advocacy for women's empowerment and inclusion? I think the term is allies, but how have you seen that, and what do you think the importance of that in preparing women for workforce labor here?
So I think I mentioned that a little bit in my talk. It's very important to have women leaders support women. But in Saudi Arabia, at the time that I started working, and I think it's still the case in many companies, the majority of senior leaders in the company are male. And so it is absolutely crucial. And most of the people that have helped me in my career were male. So call it mentor, sponsor, advocate. And culturally, that was difficult in Saudi Arabia because you know, it's not it's awkward sometimes. And so, but I would still suggest that this is one of the most important things and something that has personally shaped my career. And I would encourage all of the men on the call to try and reach out to the women in their organization, Saudi women, even if they think that, you know, it might be uncomfortable at first, these barriers get overcome as trust is built between them. So really, I would encourage all of the men on this call, as well as the women, clearly to go out and try it. Even if there isn't a formal mentorship, coaching, pairing program in place, to just do it on a personal basis and try.
Great, thank you. I'll take one final question here, and either of you can speak to it, but I think it's a fitting one as we consider International Women's Day as a global event. This is from May Al-Ajlani, and she's saying that the numbers reported for gender parity in developed countries seem to be on the decline, which of course is in contrast to what we're seeing in the Middle East as there are recent labor reforms. And so what are your thoughts on how expanded participation in the workplace is important, both in the developed and countries that are new to labor reform?
Well, maybe I'll jump in. For me, I would just say that I think that we still have some things we really have to work out as societies. So I was really happy I had my children when I was living in Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, because childcare there, and then I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Brussels, Belgium, which are two phenomenal places to be a working woman because daycare is so fantastic and inexpensive. And I was so happy to be in both those locations when my kids were younger, because it really created the conditions for me to be able to focus on my career. And I think that for a lot of women, figuring out how you balance some of those things in societies maybe that aren't as supportive in some ways of that remains a challenge. And it is something that limits sometimes our ability, is that cultural norms. So picking the right husband, prioritizing, you know, how you want to live your life with children or without children, how you're going to care for your parents, those kinds of things. All those societal expectations that fall on women, you need to figure out a plan for how you're going to deal with those. And I think that that's in the moment for a lot of developing countries, women in developing countries, not just some of the setbacks that we see in the workplace with glass ceilings or whatever, but also that our societies are, they're saying they want women in, but yet we don't always have the social support we need. And so you got to go figure it out yourself. And that's not always easy for everybody to do. So that would be kind of my personal.
And building on that, you know, it was clear from the B20 discussions that there isn't one model that fits all countries. And so it's important to have the intent, but then it's up to each country, each company to figure out how to make this possible within their culture and their boundaries.
Thank you, Dana. I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much, Jaime, Martina, for being with us. And I'll just turn it over to Amanda now to wrap us up. But thank you. It was a great way to spend International Women's Day.
Thank you, Jaime. What a phenomenal presentation and discussion. We appreciate everyone for joining us today, celebrating the achievement of women leaders. A special note of gratitude to Christina Stroller at UPS, as well as Mario and Carla and their team at the US Embassy for helping us craft this event and all the preparation time and work they contributed. To our attendees, your feedback is incredibly important to us at AmCham, so we invite you to share your thoughts in our feedback survey. Thank you for joining us. Continue to choose to challenge, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone. Thank you.